I wish I could say I was shocked. I wish I could say that when I saw what they gave my son, my blood ran cold, or time slowed down, or whatever it is people say in those dramatic movie moments. But the truth felt like something I'd been waiting for. Not in a hopeful way, in a dread-heavy, of course it's coming kind of way. The party was held at my brother Jason's house, which is basically a Pinterest board come to life. Giant balloon arches in perfectly coordinated colors. A dessert table that looked like it had its own PR manager. Matching t-shirts for the birthday twins that said, "Born to Shine." Kids running around with hand-stitched party bags clutched like treasure. My son Ethan clutched mine. He's 7. He wore the space-themed bow tie he picked out himself that morning, the one he said made him feel like an astronaut. He was nervous before we arrived. He always is with big crowds. But he practiced saying happy birthday in the car. Twice. He even made 2 little cards himself, one for each cousin. Drew little rockets on them. Signed them with love. I was proud of him just for showing up. My wife Scarlett and I stayed near the food table, exchanging polite small talk with people we barely knew. I tried to ignore how Jason barely acknowledged us. How my mom gave me that brittle smile that said, "Don't start anything." How my father nodded once and went back to carving ham like it required surgical focus. Then they handed out the gift bags. Each one had the child's name in glitter letters. Stuffed animals, bubble wands, personalized water bottles, a tiny keychain with the first initial. One by one, the kids beamed and tore through them like it was Christmas morning. Then they handed one to Ethan. A plain white paper bag. No glitter. No name. Just a single sticky note slapped crooked across the front in Jason's handwriting. "Try harder next year." Ethan blinked at it like maybe he was reading it wrong. Like maybe there was something inside that would explain the joke. He reached in. A broken crayon. A used eraser. A wrapped peppermint that looked like it had been rattling around in someone's purse. That was it. I saw his throat tighten. He glanced at me. I felt his small fingers inch toward mine, like he was bracing for something. Like maybe he thought he had done something wrong. And then came the laughter from the adults. Jason laughed first. That high, sharp laugh he does when he wants everyone to know he's in charge of the joke. "He's been acting up lately," he said, waving it off like it was cute. Interrupting, talking back, crying over tiny things. "This is just a little wake-up call." My mother chuckled. "Honestly, it's good for him. You coddle him too much." Even my dad grunted some half-laugh, like it was all just awkward but harmless. The other kids laughed too. They didn't know why, kids never really do, but they followed the lead. Ethan smiled, that tight, trembling smile that kids do when they're trying not to cry. Scarlett looked at me. Not with shock, with something quieter, steadier. She crouched beside Ethan, took the bag gently from his hands and said, "You don't need this. Let's go get some real cake." We stood up. I didn't say a word. Neither did she. We took his hands and walked out of that house like we were walking out of a burning building. But Jason wasn't done. As we reached our car in the driveway, I heard the front door slam and his footsteps behind us. "Seriously, Mason? You're just going to leave? It was a joke, for God's sake." His voice carried across the yard, making a few neighbors glance over. I opened the car door for Ethan, making sure he was safely inside before turning to face my brother. "A joke is supposed to be funny," I said quietly. Jason's face flushed red. "This is exactly the problem. You're raising him to be soft, to run away when things get tough." "No," Scarlett said, her voice calm but firm. "We're raising him to know when he's being respected and when he's not." Jason stepped closer, lowering his voice to a hiss. "After everything we've done for you, everything this family has given you, and you can't take one little joke." I felt a cold clarity wash over me. "What exactly has this family given me, Jason? Don't play dumb. You know exactly what I mean." He glanced at our car, the modest sedan we'd driven for years, then back at his sprawling house. "If you walk away now, don't expect to be welcome at the next family gathering. Or any gathering." I nodded slowly. "Noted." As we drove away, I watched Jason in the rearview mirror, standing in his driveway with his arms crossed. looking smaller somehow despite his expensive clothes and perfect house. At home, Ethan sat on the couch and stared at the glitter rockets on his birthday cards, like they might rearrange themselves into a reason. He asked, "Was it because I didn't say thank you fast enough?" I said, "No, sweetheart. It was because some people forget how to be kind." He nodded, pressed the cards to his chest like they might guard his heart. He fell asleep on the couch, curled up under the soft throw blanket his mom gave him last Christmas. The one that says, "You are brave, you are smart, you are loved." I sat in the kitchen while Scarlett made tea. Neither of us said much. We didn't have to. This wasn't new, just final. After a while, she said, "I paused the payments, the rent, the car loan, the utility fund, all of it." I nodded. I opened the drawer where we kept the important stuff, pulled out the folder I'd been adding to quietly over the years. Text messages, photos, a printout of the email where Jason asked if I could loan him money for the twins' private school tuition, the Venmo receipts, the one where I covered our parents' property tax and they said, "We'll pay you back after the cruise." The folder was thick. I added one last thing, the sticky note. "Try harder next year." I slipped it into a clear sleeve right on top. Scarlett watched me, didn't say a word, but when I looked at her, she nodded. Not like someone giving permission, like someone saying, "Finally." Tomorrow morning, I dropped something off, quietly, no message, no confrontation, just truth. They wanted to teach my son a lesson? Fine. They were about to learn one too. It didn't start with my son. That's the part that really hurts. He should have been safe, protected, loved by his entire family, not just the one he was born into. But it did start long before him. It started with me. Growing up in my house meant learning how to perform, how to twist yourself into whatever version of a child got the least amount of criticism that day. It meant reading the room before you even learned to read a book. It meant silence was safer than honesty, and pretending to be happy was easier than explaining why you weren't. Jason was always the favorite. That was never said out loud, not directly. But it didn't have to be. It was in the tone of voice my parents used when they spoke to him. In the way they lit up at his stories, even when they were dull. In the way my accomplishments were acknowledged with a distracted, "That's good." While Jason's most minor wins were met with celebration, cake, and 50 family group texts. I remember once in 3rd grade, I came home clutching a certificate for perfect attendance. I had fought through colds and stomach aches just to earn that paper. I handed it to my mother with pride, and she barely glanced at it before saying, "Jason got Student of the Month. You know that's a much bigger deal." When I brought home an A+ in math, a subject I had struggled with for months, my dad said, "Your brother never brought home less than an A." When I got the lead in the school play, they didn't come. Jason had a baseball game, a practice game, not even a tournament, but it was important to him. So they said they'd try to make the next one. They never did. Birthdays were the worst. My parties were always joint celebrations with Jason, even though our birthdays were nearly 2 months apart. My name was an afterthought on the cake. One year, they gave us one present to share. It was a baseball glove. Jason's size. I was always too much or not enough. Too quiet, too dramatic, too shy, too opinionated. I cried too easily. I asked too many questions. I talked back. I sulked. I didn't smile enough. I didn't smile the right way. There were no bruises, no yelling. Just a constant low hum of not measuring up, and then being told I was sensitive for noticing. When I was 15, I came home crying after a teacher accused me of cheating on a test. I hadn't. I was devastated. My mom's response was, "Well, you do keep to yourself a lot. Maybe you look suspicious. Next time try to smile more and act normal." At 17, I finally got the courage to tell my parents I thought I might be depressed. My mom rolled her eyes and said, "That's the new trend, isn't it? Everyone thinks they're depressed. They're just bored. Find a hobby." Jason told me I was being dramatic, then borrowed my laptop and never returned it in the same condition. By the time I left for college, I was numb. I didn't expect them to come to move-in day, and they didn't disappoint. They mailed me a card a week late with $25 and a sticky note that said, "Don't blow it." I didn't blow it. I got through school, found therapy, learned how to name things, emotional neglect, scapegoating, passive-aggressive control. I learned how to unlearn it. When I met Scarlett, I was still afraid of being too much. I apologized for crying during a movie. She just handed me a tissue and said, "That part hit hard, huh?" Like it was the most normal thing in the world. She was the first person who ever asked what I wanted for my birthday and actually got it right. Not because she guessed, but because she listened. When I told her about my family, I downplayed it, made it sound quirky. She didn't push, but the first time she met them, she squeezed my hand under the table. After dinner, she said, "You weren't exaggerating." I let them back in when we had Ethan. I wanted him to have a big family, cousins, holidays, grandparents who doted on him. I wanted him to have what I didn't. Started slowly. Jason commenting on Ethan's clothes. "He dresses a little weird, doesn't he?" My mom insisting that Ethan should hug everyone, even when he didn't want to. "Don't be rude, sweetie. Give Uncle Bill a proper hug." My dad making jokes about him being soft when he cried at loud noises. Better toughen up if he wants to make it in this family. I tried to explain. I told them he had sensory processing challenges, that he needed support, not shame, that he was doing his best. They rolled their eyes. "You're overreacting. He's fine." Jason called me a snowplow parent, said I was raising a future doormat. And when I set boundaries, I became the problem. The difficult one. The dramatic one. Every time I stood up for Ethan, it was met with the same tactics they used on me. Minimization, mockery, cold silence. Sometimes they even pitted me, which was worse. "He just wants to feel important," my mother whispered once to Jason, not realizing I was within earshot. Let him have this. Like advocating for my child was a phase, a tantrum, and I let it go. I let it go more times than I can count because I kept hoping it would get better, that they would come around, that maybe this time they would see him, really see him. But they didn't. They saw themselves, their need to feel superior, their desire to maintain the hierarchy that kept them comfortable. Ethan was just the next in line for the same treatment they gave me. Only now I knew what it was, and now I had a choice. I could keep giving them chances, keep letting them break him bit by bit, the way they broke me. Or I could stop the cycle. I chose him. I chose me. What they didn't know, what they never bothered to ask about, was the extent of my financial support. 3 years ago, when Jason's business venture failed spectacularly, I was the one who stepped in. Not with a loan, but with a lifeline. I paid half their mortgage every month. I covered the twins' private school tuition when Jason claimed they couldn't possibly switch schools now. I paid for the utilities, the car loan, even the landscaping service that kept their yard looking Instagram perfect. My parents knew. They encouraged it. "That's what family does," my mother said. "Besides, you don't have children in private school. You can afford it." What she meant was, Ethan goes to public school because of his IEP accommodations. Because we chose a school that would support him, not push him to fit a mold. What she meant was, your money should go to the normal grandchildren. I never told Jason I knew about the text he sent our parents last Christmas. "Mason's kid is getting weirder. Scarlett babies him too much. At least we're raising our boys right." I never told him I saw the reply from my father. "Just keep being nice to your brother. He's always been sensitive about these things. Besides, we need him to keep helping with the bills until you get back on your feet." And tomorrow they would understand what that means. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table with Scarlett, our laptops open, our bank statements spread out like evidence at a trial. Which, in a way, they were. "Are you sure about this?" Scarlett asked, not for the first time. She wasn't questioning my decision. She was giving me space to question it myself. "I've never been more sure of anything," I said, and I meant it. The clarity I felt was almost dizzying, like I'd been underwater for years and had finally broken the surface. We started with the financials. 3 years of bank statements, meticulously highlighting every transfer to Jason and my parents. The mortgage payments that kept their house from foreclosure. The car loan that Jason insisted was just until things turn around. The utility bills I'd been paying directly because Jason kept forgetting to pay them, leaving his family in the dark twice before I stepped in. The private school tuition for the twins that somehow became my responsibility because they're already settled there. It would be cruel to move them. All told, I'd given them over $157,000 in the past 3 years alone. Money that could have gone to Ethan's college fund. Money that could have paid off our own mortgage. Money that disappeared into their lifestyle without so much as a thank you note. Next came the text messages. The ones where Jason asked for just a little help that turned into regular payments. The ones where he complained about my parenting style while asking me to cover his electric bill. The group chat where my parents discussed how to approach me for more money because Mason always gives in if you make him feel guilty enough. I printed the email from my mother where she said, "We're not asking for ourselves, we're asking for the twins. Don't you want what's best for them? It's not like Ethan needs private school with his issues." I printed the text from Jason to my parents that I wasn't supposed to see. "Mason's coming to dinner tomorrow. I need another $5,000 for the kitchen renovation. Mom, can you mention how stressed Victoria is about cooking in an outdated kitchen? That usually works on him." I printed the notes from Ethan's therapist documenting his anxiety after family gatherings. The way he'd ask if he was broken or weird after spending time with his cousins and grandparents. I printed photos. Ethan sitting alone at family gatherings, while the twins were surrounded by adults. The twins opening piles of gifts at Christmas while Ethan got a single present, usually something inappropriate for his age or interests, like the violent video game they gave him last year despite knowing he was sensitive to scary images. And finally, I printed the sticky note. "Try harder next year." I placed it in a plastic sleeve at the very front of the folder. By 4 a.m., we had compiled everything into a 3-inch binder. Cold, hard evidence of years of manipulation, emotional abuse, and financial exploitation. Scarlett made coffee while I made one last call to our bank. I canceled all automatic payments to Jason's accounts. I removed my name from the utility accounts I'd been paying. I called the private school and informed them I would no longer be paying the twins' tuition. "What about your parents?" Scarlett asked quietly. I hesitated. They were in their 70s, living on a fixed income, but they also had a vacation home they refused to sell and took cruises twice a year. "They'll be fine," I said finally. "They have resources. They just preferred using mine." At 6 a.m., we woke Ethan. We told him we were going to drop him at his best friend Noah's house for a playdate. Noah's mom, Kim, was one of the few people who knew the full story. She'd offered to take Ethan for the morning, no questions asked. "Are we still going to the Science Museum later?" Ethan asked, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Absolutely," I promised. "Mom and I just have an errand to run first." We drove in silence to Jason's house. The neighborhood was quiet, most families still asleep on a Sunday morning. Jason's house stood out with its perfectly manicured lawn and luxury cars in the driveway. A lifestyle built on borrowed money. "My money. Do you want me to come with you?" Scarlett asked as I pulled into the driveway. I shook my head. "I need to do this alone." The weight of the binder felt right in my hands as I walked to the front door. I didn't ring the bell. I didn't knock. I simply placed the binder on the welcome mat, the one that said, "The Johnsons, where life is beautiful," and walked away. I was halfway back to the car when the door opened. Jason stood there in his bathrobe, looking confused. "Mason, what are you doing here so early?" I nodded toward the binder at his feet. "Just returning something that belongs to you." He bent down, picked up the binder, and flipped it open. His face changed as he saw the first page, the sticky note in its plastic sleeve. "What is this?" he asked, his voice rising. "Everything," I said simply. "Everything you've taken. Everything you've said. Everything you've done." He flipped through more pages, his face growing paler by the second. When he reached the bank statements, I saw the moment it hit him what this meant. "You can't do this," he said, his voice shaking. "You can't just cut us off. The mortgage is due next week. The twins' tuition is your responsibility." I finished for him. "Not mine. Never was. But we're family, he shouted, loud enough that a neighbor's porch light flicked on. Yes, I agreed. And that's why I let it go on so long. But family doesn't treat a 7-year-old child the way you treated mine yesterday. Family doesn't manipulate and use each other. Family doesn't take without giving. He threw the binder down, pages scattering across the porch. You self-righteous prick. You think you're better than us? You and your weird kid and your holier-than-thou attitude. I felt nothing. No anger. No hurt. Just a profound sense of finally being free. I don't think I'm better than you, Jason. I just finally understand that I'm not worse. I turned to walk away, and that's when he lunged. Not to hit me. Jason was never one for direct confrontation, but to grab my arm, to force me to stay and listen to whatever justification he'd come up with. I stepped back, and he stumbled forward, landing hard on his knees on the concrete walkway. "Mason!" he screamed, a sound so primal and desperate that lights began turning on up and down the street. "You can't do this to me." I got into the car where Scarlett waited, her face calm but alert. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I'm fine," I said, and meant it. As we backed out of the driveway, I saw Jason still on his knees, gathering the scattered pages with frantic movements. A police car turned slowly onto the street. Someone must have called about the disturbance. "Should we stay?" Scarlett asked, watching the scene unfold. "No," I said. "There's nothing illegal about stopping financial support. Nothing illegal about showing someone their own words. Let him explain to the officers why he's screaming in his front yard at 6:30 in the morning." As we drove away, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not happy exactly, but free. Like I'd finally put down a weight I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten it wasn't part of me. "Do you think they'll understand?" Scarlett asked. "Do you think they'll ever see what they did?" I thought about it for a moment. "No," I said finally. "They'll make themselves the victims. They always do. But it doesn't matter anymore. We're not playing that game." We picked up Ethan from Noah's house. He was laughing, building a massive Lego spaceship with his friend. When he saw us, he ran over with a smile so bright it made my chest ache. "Dad." Noah's mom made pancakes shaped like rockets. "And she said we can go to the park after the science museum if it's okay with you." I knelt down to his level, looked into those clear, trusting eyes. "That sounds perfect, buddy. Absolutely perfect." As we drove to the science museum, Ethan chattering excitedly about the planetarium show, my phone began to buzz. Text after text. Call after call. My parents. Jason. Victoria. Even some extended family members I barely spoke to. I turned off my phone and put it in the glove compartment. Today was for Ethan. Tomorrow would be for dealing with the fallout. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of what they might say or do. The worst had already happened. They had shown who they truly were, not just to me but to my son. And now I had shown them who I truly was. Not the doormat they'd come to expect. Not the ATM they'd come to rely on. Just a father, protecting his son. Finally, the fallout was nuclear. By Monday morning, my phone had 47 missed calls, 93 text messages, and 16 voicemails. I listened to exactly one from my mother before deleting the rest. "Mason, I don't know what kind of game you think you're playing." Her voice was tight, controlled, but with that tremor of rage I knew so well. "But you need to call Jason immediately. The bank called him about the mortgage. This isn't funny anymore. This is family, Mason. Family." I deleted everything else without listening. Then I blocked their numbers one by one. Not forever, maybe, but for now. I needed space to breathe. Scarlett and I had prepared for this. We'd taken Monday off work. We kept Ethan home from school, just in case anyone decided to show up there. We changed our security system codes and added cameras to our front and back doors. Not because we thought they'd hurt us physically, but because we knew how desperate people could get when their financial safety net suddenly disappeared. At 10:17 a.m., the doorbell rang. Through the security camera, I saw my father standing on our porch, hands in his pockets, face set in that stern expression I'd grown up fearing. I didn't answer. At 11:45 a.m., It was my mother, clutching her purse like a shield. She rang 3 times, then started knocking. "Mason, I know you're in there. This is ridiculous. We need to talk about this like adults." I didn't answer. At 2:30 p.m., it was Victoria, Jason's wife. She looked terrible. Eyes red-rimmed, hair uncombed. She didn't ring or knock. She just stood there, staring at the door for almost 5 minutes before leaving an envelope and walking away. I waited until she was gone before retrieving it. Inside was a handwritten letter. "Mason, I don't know what Jason did this time, but please don't punish the twins for it. They're just kids. They don't understand why their uncle is suddenly cutting them off. The school called today. They can't attend classes until the tuition is paid. Please, if not for Jason, then for them. Victoria." I showed it to Scarlett, who read it twice before handing it back. "She doesn't even mention Ethan," she said quietly. "Not one word about what they did to him." I nodded, folding the letter and placing it in the drawer where I kept everything else. They never do. By Tuesday, they'd moved on to more aggressive tactics. Jason sent an email to my workplace, copying my boss and several colleagues, claiming I was mentally unstable and making dangerous financial decisions that could impact my professional judgment. Thankfully, my boss had known me for 8 years and knew about my family situation. He deleted the email and advised me to consider legal action if the harassment continued. My parents took a different approach. They called Scarlett's parents, spinning a tale about how I was having some kind of breakdown, cutting off my family for no reason, and how worried they were about Ethan being in that environment. Scarlett's parents, who had witnessed my family's behavior firsthand at our wedding, simply told them they had the wrong number and hung up. On Wednesday, the flying monkeys arrived. Distant relatives and family friends I barely knew began reaching out, all with the same message. "Your parents are devastated. They don't understand what they did wrong. Family is everything, Mason. You can't just cut people off without talking." I didn't respond to any of them. I knew how this worked. I'd seen it before when other family members had tried to set boundaries. The smear campaign, the recruitment of allies, the rewriting of history. By Thursday, rumors were circulating that I was having an affair, that I was gambling, that I was in some kind of cult. Anything to explain why I would suddenly stop financially supporting my family without their permission. On Friday morning, I received a certified letter from an attorney. Jason was threatening to sue me for promised financial support. The letter claimed I had verbally agreed to pay the twins' tuition through high school and that they had made financial decisions based on that promise. I handed it to our lawyer, who laughed out loud. "They have no case," she assured me. "Verbal promises for financial gifts aren't enforceable contracts, especially when there's no consideration on their part. Besides, we have plenty of evidence that this was coerced support, not freely given promises." She drafted a response that was polite, professional, and absolutely terrifying in its clarity. It referenced the documented pattern of emotional manipulation, the text messages proving they had deliberately used guilt to extract money, and the fact that I had never, at any point, signed any agreement regarding ongoing financial support. It ended with a simple statement: any further contact with my client or his family, including through third parties, will be considered harassment and will be dealt with accordingly. We sent it certified mail, return receipt requested. The weekend brought silence. Blessed, unexpected silence. No calls, no visits, no emails. On Sunday, we took Ethan to the park. He was different already, lighter, more confident. He laughed louder. He didn't look over his shoulder to see if anyone was judging him. He didn't apologize for being excited about the ducks in the pond. As we sat on a bench watching him feed the ducks, Scarlett squeezed my hand. "You did the right thing," she said softly. "I know," I replied, and for once I did. The silence lasted exactly 8 days. On Monday of the following week, my mother showed up at my office. She had somehow talked her way past reception, claiming a family emergency. I found her sitting in my office chair when I returned from a meeting. "We need to talk," she said, her voice eerily calm. "This has gone on long enough." I stood in the doorway, not entering the room. "I have nothing to say to you. I'm your mother," she said, as if that explained everything. You don't get to just cut me out of your life. Actually, I do, I replied. And if you don't leave now, I'll call security. She stood up, smoothing her expensive slacks. Your father and I have been talking. We're willing to forgive you for all this drama if you just come to your senses. Jason's house is going into foreclosure. The twins had to leave their school. Is that really what you wanted? To hurt innocent children? The guilt trip was so predictable I almost laughed. They're not innocent in this, Mom. They gave my son a gift bag that said, "Try harder next year," and filled it with trash. They laughed at him. You laughed at him. She waved her hand dismissively. It was a joke, Mason. Children need to learn to take jokes. You're raising him to be too sensitive. No, I said firmly. I'm raising him to know his worth. She stared at me for a long moment, then picked up her purse. You know, your father and I won't be around forever. When we're gone, you'll regret this petty grudge. Maybe, I conceded, but I'd regret letting you hurt my son more. As she walked past me, she paused. Jason was right about you. You always did think you were better than everyone else. I didn't respond. I watched her walk down the hallway, head high, like she was the wronged party in all of this. Maybe in her mind she was. That evening, I received a text from a number I didn't recognize. It was Jason. The bank is taking the house. Victoria left with the twins. They're staying with her parents. I hope you're happy now. You've destroyed this family. I showed it to Scarlett, who read it with a raised eyebrow. Notice how it's still your fault, she observed. Not his for living beyond his means. Not his for treating his brother like an ATM. Not his for bullying a 7-year-old child. Somehow, it's still your responsibility. I nodded, then blocked the new number without responding. 2 days later, my father called from a payphone. I answered, not recognizing the number. Your mother is in the hospital, he said without preamble. Stress-induced hypertension. The doctor says it's serious. She's asking for you. My heart sank. Despite everything, I didn't want her to suffer. Which hospital? Memorial. Room 302. His voice was gruff, angry. Though I don't know why she wants to see you after what you've done. I hung up and immediately called Memorial Hospital. There was no patient by my mother's name. I called 3 other local hospitals. Nothing. It was a lie. Another manipulation tactic. They were getting desperate. That night, I sat down and wrote 3 letters. 1 to my parents. 1 to Jason. 1 to the twins. To my parents, I wrote about the years of emotional neglect. The favoritism. The way they had taught me I was worth less than my brother. I told them I forgave them, not because they deserved it, but because I needed to let it go. I told them I would always be their son, but I would no longer be their victim or their bank. To Jason, I wrote about the brotherhood we might have had if competition and jealousy hadn't poisoned it. I told him I was sorry his business had failed, sorry his marriage was struggling, sorry he felt the need to tear others down to build himself up. I told him I would help him find financial counseling if he wanted it, but I would never give him money again. To the twins, I wrote about how none of this was their fault. How adults sometimes make mistakes that hurt children. How I would always be their uncle, even if we didn't see each other for a while. I included 2 gift cards to the bookstore, not enough to solve any financial problems, just enough to let them know I still thought of them. I didn't mail the letters. Not yet. Maybe someday, when the wounds weren't so fresh. When I could speak my truth without it being colored by anger or hurt. For now, it was enough to have written them. To have acknowledged the pain and the loss and the complicated tangle of emotions that came with setting boundaries with family. A month passed. Then 2. The calls stopped. The visits stopped. The flying monkeys retreated. And in that silence, something beautiful happened. We healed. Ethan stopped asking if he was weird or too much. He started talking about his interests without apologizing for them. He made new friends at school, real friends who liked him for exactly who he was. Scarlett and I stopped walking on eggshells, stopped preparing for the next crisis, the next demand, the next guilt trip, and I stopped feeling responsible for everyone else's happiness. It wasn't perfect. There were still nights I lay awake, wondering if I'd done the right thing. Days when I missed the family I wished I had, rather than the one I actually had. Moments when I saw a father and son playing catch in the park and felt a pang for what might have been. But those moments grew fewer and farther between. 3 months after the birthday party incident, we received a letter from Victoria. She and the twins were living with her parents. She had filed for divorce. Jason had moved in with a friend. The house had been foreclosed on. She didn't ask for money. She didn't blame me. She simply wrote, "I understand now what you were trying to do. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. The twins miss Ethan. If he ever wants to see them, they would like that. On your terms." I showed the letter to Scarlett, who considered it carefully. "What do you think?" I asked. "I think," she said slowly, "that we should ask Ethan what he wants." So we did. We sat him down and explained, in age-appropriate terms, that his cousins missed him and wanted to see him. He thought about it for a long time, his face serious. "Can we meet them at the park?" he asked finally. "Not at their house. And can you stay with me?" "Of course," I promised. "We'll be right there the whole time." "Then okay," he said with a small smile. "I miss them too sometimes." I texted Victoria and arranged a meeting at the neutral territory of a public park. No adults except Scarlett and me. No Jason. No grandparents. Just the kids. As we drove to the park that Saturday, I felt a strange mix of hope and caution. I wasn't naive enough to think one playdate could heal years of dysfunction. But it was a start. A small step toward a new kind of family. One built on respect rather than obligation. On boundaries rather than exploitation. On love rather than fear. It wasn't the family I grew up with, but it was the family we were choosing to build. And that made all the difference.